to this special session on physical AI. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We are at an exciting inflection point where intelligence meets motion, where AI doesn't just think, but acts in the real world. Today's discussion will explore both ecosystem foundations and emerging agentic architects that unlocking physical AI. We have organized the conversation to blend local ecosystem perspectives with cutting-edge technology insights. Uh, Everybody know the news that the OpenCloud founder joined OpenAI. That's created lots of questions and discussions. That's one of the questions we want to cover today. But let's begin with the topic to our roots here in Austin. As you know, physical AI builders rooted in Silicon Valley about 18 years ago. And we started lots of physical AI activity last year. And this time is our first event in Austin. Recently, with Apptronic's $900 million funding a few days ago, Austin has become more and more visible as a center for physical AI. So, what makes physical AI unique position in Austin right now? Austin has a pretty strong ecosystem. That's the question I want to ask all our audience to see how Austin is supporting physical AI as an ecosystem. So maybe Sanjay, you want to start?
I'll pass it off to the actual physical AI builders. I'll ask the follow-up question on that.
So Flora, let's start.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting us here, and by extension, inviting our Austin robotics and AI community. So there's definitely a lot of interest in Austin. Our community. I remember last year we were just like about 10 people talking about robotics, and now we have like the last meeting we had like over 100 people that join us. The community has been growing rapidly. We have over 2,000 engineers and college students and entrepreneurs, and so there's definitely a lot of interest, and that's because, as you might know, we've been doing robotics for like since '60s, but there's this new paradigm where you have the AI that's practically opening like new horizons. And so a lot of people in town see this opportunity, and so we've had a lot of interest, and a lot of people want to get into AI for robotics and robotics itself. And so we've seen definitely like a different like an increase in the activities here in Austin, not just on the. So we started the community. Last year we increased the community, but this year we are going to work on getting the startups off the ground, and also more education. A lot of people want to get into robotics, but they don't know where to get started. So we'll start working from there. But it's definitely Austin. Our mission is to create the largest robotics industry right here in the heart of Texas. So besides building the community, of course, we need to build the ecosystem for people to build new businesses here in town in robotics field. So.
Thank you, Flora. Melissa, you were involved in Austin and San Antonio's ecosystem. You were involved with several communities. Maybe you can share your thoughts.
That's right. Yeah, I think I get to do some of the exciting work at the youngest of ages, right? So I got to speak at a really neat event. We have a science and technology museum here in San Antonio. I got to speak to a few hundred young people. What was really exciting about, when I say young people, I'm talking about middle school aged children. And when you ask them what they wanted to be when they grew up, they all were talking, most of them said they wanted to be engineers, which was so super exciting to see. Sorry, there's feedback somehow. I hope it's not me. But it was really exciting to see young people getting excited about what it's like to be an engineer and to get into AI and robotics, the question that came up is the application, right? So they understood that they wanted to know AI and I want to know how to engineer, but how do I get connected to the application? So those questions were really interesting to start ideating with them how they can bring the technology to a use case. When you talked about Peter, Steinberger going over to OpenAI, was interesting to me about that shift was that he wanted to keep it, well, at least it's said that he wanted to keep it accessible, crowdsourced, a free resource, right? For people to be able to use. But I feel like from the investment community, we have to start seeing, right, what's the business model? And that's one of the things that I kept trying to teach the children is to think about how do we apply this in a way that we can create a business behind it. If it's really going to be sustainable, we start talking about application and not just AI, right? And not just OpenClaw, but we talk about the application and how do we go back to business fundamentals and make sure that it's something that sustains you in a career.
Okay, Sean, your turn.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. So what I see with Austin is really a wealth of talents. I mean, you have UT Austin, which is actually responsible for thinking out. So a little bit of background, actually. I used to be a early member of Niantic Labs, so I'm fully in a fraternity when I was just such a small team within Google. And the founding team members have deep roots, essentially, within UT Austin. And I actually, started there. That was the original Keyfold team. And then afterwards, I joined a computer vision AI startup that actually hired many, many people from the schools within Austin's essential city limits. And what I'm seeing with, for example, Florence meetup is that there's a lot of curiosity. There's a lot of young talents. Now with democratized tools like OpenClaw is a very powerful combo, essentially, for experimentation, right? So to the extent that we're able to link real enterprise applications or factories together into the fall, I think that matches or marries that younger creative energy, sort of energy, with essentially established use cases that we can start solving real problems in Cisco AI.
Okay, great. Let's move to the next question.
Can I add something there, David? I mean, just based on what, first of all, I want to say kudos to you for putting this together, because a lot of times I think people just think about AI as something ethereal. It's out there in the cloud. Is there any real world practical applications, right? And we're in Texas, right? I'm based in Dallas, so you think of like energy, you think of manufacturing, you think of real human beings doing work. And I want to thank you for bringing this conversation from the virtual world into the real world, right?
Yeah, I think.
I will see you soon.
Yeah, thanks, David. David. Thanks, David. I think Madhu Gaganam. I'm a founder of Cogniad. So I've been in the industrial sector world for 30 years now. Started off as an automation engineer. In fact, started off programming robots back in 90s. Totally different from what we are talking today. I mean, there's a variation of what we talk today. David, so Austin, when I go back to your question, right? Austin has always had this weird, wonderful mix, right? And I've been here for 15 years before moving from Silicon Valley, right? Incredible talent from UT Austin, right? And a serious manufacturing backbone now, abundant energy that is available. And what I've been seeing is sort of like, let's build it sort of an attitude that refuses to wait for any permission, right? And what's special, I noticed right now, is that all these pieces are finally clicking together, right? The F50, the Physical AI Summit that you conduct, right, across on here, and the monthly robotics and AI meetups, Florian, And I find that these are not not just any networking events anymore. They are turning to be like Austin. They're turning essentially Austin into a real collaboration hub, right? It's not just talking anymore, right? We see people are building it, testing it, deploying physical systems here, and I feel like Austin is becoming the place where physical AI stops being a theory and starts becoming the real metal and code on the factory floor, right? And that's the Austin I love, right? Weird enough to try crazy ideas, right? Practical enough to make them work.
Yeah, and I can I like to make a note there. So that's been like, as I said, like last year, like our community has been like really we're trying to find each other, like who's doing robotics in Austin. That's and so I feel like this year is the year where, as you just said, like is the year where like real applications are going to happen, just because people are starting working, like starting collaborating. And so we're going from just meeting to actually making real things happen. And I do see it, and this is one of the things that we'll be working this year to bring, besides um, like just meeting. It's just we like, okay, let's make something real happen. So that's the mission for this year.
Yeah, and to build on this conversation, for those that don't know me, my focus has really been on go-to-market strategy. Thanks for the partnership, David. I launched an AI space podcast to talk to real founders, technologists, innovators, to share real-world insights. And what we want to do here is separate the signal from the noise. So I want to ask the panelists here. This is 2026. Tell us what's real in physical AI in 2026. What do you plan to execute? What are we building? How do we get to real ROI?
Right, I can take a little stab at that. How we're applying that, I would say, at least from my standpoint, I spend a lot of time in the defense world, right? Dual use defense tech. One of the real applications, obviously, is autonomy, right? So building out those vision models, like Fern said, right? It used to be those computer vision models, but that data tagging and how to use that to help vehicles, whether that's in the air, whether that's underwater, whether that's ground vehicles. And even Madhu, we were talking about robotics on the engineering floors. So I think as we teach kids a way to apply from school, how am I applying to a job that's doing good? The more we get to those autonomous language models, and they're smarter and are able to interact with one another in a safe way, right? We sort of framed this as the open claw, which is how do we create this machine speaking to machine, but doing that in the framework of a very safe environment. I think that's another real application that has to come alongside of our capabilities, is how do we have them collect to one another, but do that in a real safe way. I think that's been something that, from the investment standpoint, we're really interested in. How do we create inside of safeguard rails?
Yeah, I think, Sanjay, I would say that what is the current state of physical AI, if you ask me, right? I mean, there are some things that actually are value, but physical AI, I would say that it's still very early stages, evolving. Um, there are quite a few aspects to it, right? But I think what we have, if you ask what we have achieved so far, is we have achieved a significant progress around physical AI in a clean lab sort of an environment, right? Maybe in a proof of concept, maybe a little bit of pilots, right? But in real manufacturing world, I would say that even like physical world, right? When we think about manufacturing, um, I do see that there are challenges, right? Everything changes because you're talking about, the gravity aspect of it, the human element, the safety element, what Melissa talked about. I think it's just messy, right? From an ROI perspective, right? there are use cases, but they are still evolving when it comes to physical AI when we think about an ROI. But there are some hurdles that they need to get through, right? The whole concept of building a robot, right, or with physical intelligence or physics-induced neural networks into a particular robot is a lot different from how it is going to work in an environment like a manufacturing or a factory floor or a shop floor, right? There's a lot of underlying and overlying aspects that need to be considered from an ROI perspective. So, and also it's on the people side, like how do people actually identify the use cases that actually imply or bring benefit with physical AI today on the factory floor. So when we talk about open cloud, that's a little bit different, right? When we talk about the agents and aspects that actually work from a personal space standpoint of view or on a virtual screen, obviously they already provide a lot of value. Bringing them to the real physical world is where the challenges are, and it's evolving. And we will see a lot of benefits this year based on the advancement that have been made, and once they start hitting the factory floors.
Okay, so I want to share my perspective related to this one about the AI agent. To me, before AI agent, it's very difficult to really develop an embodied AI system who can control robots until like mid last year, July, June, and the AI agents made lots of progress right after the OpenAI announced its first agents, and there's many others coming. So to me is that in the past, controlling a robots by AI is, I would say, in the near future wasn't realistic until very recently. So to me, that OpenClaw is another example. We're going to follow up that one, but let's start with AI agents first. So AI agents can really self-control many aspects which people, a human, were thinking before. So that's enable the hardware control in a different level. Mando mentioned a couple use cases there. To me, this is open. To me, this is a new ground. In 2026, we saw significant development. But beyond agents, I think NVIDIA and Siemens were talking about physical AI operating system. This means we'll automate lots of tasks as before. But my honest thinking is that, well, Siemens definitely has lots of advantage and leading cases in the physical AI world. But the real software, particularly like OpenCloud, innovation was far faster than most people had imagined in the past. I think both paths will maybe collapse one day.
David, that's a great point, right? I think just everything you said, right? Just to add to that, right? Like, if I have to say that, we got very good at agents that can just think, right? Reasoning aspect of it, right? With OpenClaw now, that is like very much accessible, right? But now we have to move, or we are already moving, right? Where the agents need to start feeling and reacting in real time, right? So the breakthroughs that are still needed, I think, is in that space, whether it's related to the perception that actually can understand the context, right? When you think about the context, I'm talking about whether it's environment, what's happening around the environment, what's happening with the individual that's present, what's happening with my processes, downstream, upstream, things like that, right? These are sort of the things that need to happen, and that intelligence also we need to make sure that are not going to scare humans away, right? So that's that's sort of alignment I'm seeing, right? Like when we essentially connect the agents to the physical AI space.
Mm-hmm.
David, I think what Madhu says is very important about context and environment. I'll give you a simple example. For my podcast, I've asked multiple LLMs to assess my transcripts and my metrics, and it'll produce some results. I said, only give me actual lines and give me real metrics. And it'll produce the material. I said, are those actual lines? It says, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't. So I say, basically, you lied. Yes, you're right, I lied. And then they would not actually read the screenshots. They would just go on cached from the previous chat. So I think as we build out these agents, the whole concept of AI governance, ethical, responsible AI, humans in the loop, I think we just got to be, wise as we go forward. People hype AI agents, right? But making sure that they are trustworthy and they are, looking at the actual data. I think that's something that we'll have to kind of figure out, especially if it's not reading the right situation or the right context or appropriate for the environment, right?
Well, I think that's why we don't see it yet in B2B applications, right? It's still this experimental world that we are all, I think the LLMs are trying to figure out how we use it, but it isn't, we can't figure out how to monetize it because it isn't used at a B2B level yet. And to your point, Sanjay, I don't know how many times I have to tell whatever LLM, I already told you to forget that method, right? We've already talked about this. You're just going back to old cash, and it's just not reliable. It's not reliable information. And if I'm using that in a business setting, right, that could be very damaging to the company that I work for, which is why we're sort of seeing it in this consumer free for everybody, open for everybody crowdsourcing phase of it. Which I'm sure is exciting to see for those of you who have been in this industry for decades. But for those of us who are looking for ways to monetize it, to your point, Sanjay, we're still a ways away from that.
I might introduce actually a definition for agents, which is to get things done, right? You think about the role of agents, it's not necessarily to control a computer for you, it's actually to do the work for you. So in this respect, I'll bring in an example already of robotics that we see in the real world, which is Waymo versus Tesla. And these two companies have two very different philosophies as regarding to basically self-driving. I mean, Tesla calls it for self-driving, but really not. It's like 80% machine, 20% human. As soon as you take your eyes off the wheel, basically it starts screaming at you, right? Whereas Waymo is completely self-driving. However, the approach is really different because Waymo, they've got better sensors. They got LiDAR basically spinning around on top, as well as HD maps already preloaded into the device, essentially the client. So essentially it's making that onboard inference a lot easier by giving it more structure, right? That's how it's able to achieve 100% autonomy in the real world. And in a sense, that's like the B2B scenario of perfection every single time, especially when, it's actually safer than a human being at this point, right? I sent a video, literally, it saw a scooter come into the road, it just, right there. I think a human being wouldn't even be able to react that fast. And then Tesla takes a very different approach where it's cameras only, no HD nats, right? So relies purely on the neural networks that's trained on billions of hours of human driving. So essentially it's the machine side is kind of imperfect, but it's more adaptable as well. Like Waymo only works in cities where there's already a predetermined HD map, right? So that's Austin, that's SF, that's New York, that's parts of Arizona. But as soon as you leave these cities, you can do it. So it's actually it's very capable within a very specific environment. But as soon as it leaves that environment, it's very brittle, it's very fragile. Whereas Tesla, you can from San Francisco to Austin, essentially, as long as somebody is 20% on the wheel. So two different approaches with onboard inference either.
That's a great point. I just want to add my charm, right? So I come from the industrial world, right? So when we are doing automation in the factories, we look at all the aspects, right? People, organization, lights out and all that aspects of it, right? It's a slightly different. Think about productivity is one of the things that is so important in manufacturing, right? Because of the cost efficiencies and throughputs, and so the efficiency and productivity directly related to cost efficiencies, right, and ROI and other aspects. So when we think about a manufacturing, right, you cannot you cannot make robots so safe that they impact productivity, or you cannot make robots as dumb that they cannot fulfill the aspect of what we are trying to bring in from an intelligence standpoint of it. It's a challenge. That's the number one, right? The second aspect in manufacturing is also that a single robot bringing in is not an ROI thought process. When you look at overall ROI, when a company looks at, right, it's a swarm of robots, machines, people, all of them working together. You might have robots from multiple companies, not something not like a way more configured, right? You can have a robot from Boston Dynamics, from Tesla, from Amazon, right? And you can have machines, OEM machines, all of them working together, and people, maintenance technicians, disruptions. So you need to think about this swarm of things, how they coordinate together, collaborate together, right? So that's sort of a collaborative intelligence, ensuring safety, ensuring security of the people's information, ensuring the safety of products and the process information that is very near and dear to the manufacturers, right? They don't, they don't even want to save it in a cloud. Everything they want to, very, very picky about their IP, right? So it's a different way of looking at what physical AI in industrial sector needs, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Madhu. I have a follow-up question. I really like Sean's point regarding the Waymo versus Tesla. We're gonna have this case almost everywhere. I want to say how the humanoid is one side. Let's besides humanoid, there are lots of different form of robots. Are we gonna see more like general robots, means multitasking robots, or do we see more like particular task-driven robots? And a couple use cases like in space or in manufacturers. Maybe I can ask Flore or Malaysia. You guys, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm actually, so I did have that conversation with quite a few people. So they're asking, okay, let's say Tesla is going to take over all the market with, let's say, all these like humanoid robots, or maybe Aptronic. And if you look at nature, so nature, like organisms, practically they adapted to their environment. So that's kind of how I see it. Like I feel like there's this application. There are going to be applications where you really have to adapt the robot to the environment. So there's a company here in town that does, for example, robots for fire department. So in that case, you need like a very specialized robot that can endure like a lot of heat. Like you're not going to be able to do it like a more general robot, right? So, but of course, there's going to be the case where like you want a humanoid robot in your house or in a factory that's a very reliable. But even in factories, like I was thinking, is like you don't really need like a full humanoid robot. You can reduce the cost. Let's say you have a conveyor belt, and so you do like assembly of some kind, and you don't need a full humanoid robot because you have so many more components. You can have like 2 robot arms that you train. In fact, that's what I've been playing with, is like you have 2 robot arms and they're stationary, and then they can do the work specific for that task. But they're like 2 robot arms are a lot cheaper than having like a full humanoid robot. So that's kind of how I see things when it comes to. I believe we're going to have both. We're going to have more general robots and specialized robots.
Yeah, David, building on what Florence said, I had a recent conversation about manufacturing. I think you'll have those cases, but the middle case will be maybe a person working in a manufacturing setting, right? There's going to be an LLM, there's going to be an automation, there's going to be AI agents, maybe multi-orchestrated AI agents. There'll probably be a robot. There may be some sort of device like a robotic arm or what have you that they're interacting with. Then the other aspect too, not just in a regular LLM, you may have some sort of verticalized, specialized knowledge base, more like a small language model that's designed for the task, right? And those are things that will kind of be in some sort of way having to be balanced to help navigate going forward. And then also it may have to be attached to some sort of compliance database, you know, safety, etc. So those are things that I think there's going to be different permutations in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Right.
great.
back to what Florin was talking about. I was out at a training ground, and it was interesting because it was for the 4-legged robots, right? And it was a training ground, and there was a bunch of doorknobs. And I was like, I'm trying to picture, I'm thinking of the 4-legged ones that we see at the trade shows, right? And I'm trying to picture this robot going up on its hind legs or whatever, and navigating doorknobs. And the guy that was giving me the tour, he's like, I said, so does it stand on its hind legs? And he says, it's a robot. It just has a hand that comes out of the back of it. I was like, oh, we just don't make those connections between what we think a robot is supposed to do. And to Florin's point, we just give it hands, right, that come out of the back. The robots may look really different than what we have in our mind, right, Madhu?
I think we have cobots. I think that's what Ron was talking about, the arm-based arms. We have different types of mobile bases for robots, whether wheels, whether legs, or even a tracks, they put this magnetic tracks and things like that, right? And you have, simple grippers too, without any arms, right? And then you have humanoids. I think all of them have a value. I think it is where it depends on the manufacturers or the sector that looking at which one actually adds more value to them, right? So every one of them has the value, I believe, right? But to Florin's point as well, right? Most of the manufacturers don't need the sophistication of a humanoid. They can actually manage with conveyors, cobots, and arms, right? Something like that, right? But as they advance more, because we are talking brownfield, right? But as we are modernizing the brownfield factories, and we know that there is a challenge about people. We are talking about more than 2 million jobs that are going to be available for people. Manufacturing is losing jobs a lot. The average age they talk about in most of these industries is 70 plus, 60 plus. Some of these factories, right? So you're going to lose a lot of labor force in manufacturing, and with nearshoring, Texas is going to have a lot of challenges too. So when we think about these aspects, the best alternative is move towards the space of physical AI and robotics, right? And that brings different hurdles as well, right? But those are the things that is the fun part, right? That is the real work we are going to be doing over the next, few years. And this is all over the place, right? I'm part of Manufacturing Leadership Council, and we talk about all the time. I mean, yesterday, a couple of days ago, the president actually, spoke in the Senate as well, talking about the impact of losing labor force, right? So the robot and the physical AI has to pick up, and that motivation needs to be given to the manufacturers as well. The trust factor with manufacturers has to be built up, but at the same time, because they're waiting too, in one way or another, they wouldn't even know what they want, but they're waiting for something. That gap need to be fixed. So I do think that there is a lot to it, and OpenClaw is a great one of those great projects that captures that spirit, right? I mean, especially from an Austin perspective, it captures that spirit. Now we need to think in the same pattern. How do we do that with physical robots, even with those agents? Actually, if we are going to deploy or run on these physical robots, right? How do we achieve that sort of a synchronicity, right? And then build that trust among the manufacturers, whether it's an operator or another side. So there are some challenges, but I think we are on the right track, and we are moving very fast in this space.
Okay, so I'm going to try to answer the question I asked. So there's one challenge. It's called supply chain, which actually going to affect what type of robots we're going to have. So for that reason, I'm thinking that for generic robots, it may be easier to be scalable because you can get suppliers everywhere, and you're going to have some other specialized robots doing very niche type of tasks, very expensive tasks. This means people are willing to pay for very expensive parts. So the humanoid like $30,000, $50,000, actually even expensive $100,000. But for the specialized tasks, somebody willing, some manufacturer willing to pay far higher price for some parts. Other than that, then the cheaper non-standardized robots are not going to be able to compete with the supply chains of the generic robots. That's one one angle I'm looking at this. But I don't want to bring another question. I don't want to ask all of you to give a very simple answer to this question. Come back to agents and OpenClaw. So the OpenClaw's founder Peter joined OpenAI. So that's bring a couple questions. Will like XAI or Claudia or other competitors are going to build their own like OpenClaw, or they're going to forced to be integrated with the public version of the OpenClaw? And also another one related question is that maybe the OpenClaw is not important. They don't need to take actions. So I've loved to hear everybody's thoughts on this one.
Madhu, you are muted.
Sorry, hold on, okay. Sorry. So I think OpenClaw. I'm coming from the industrial perspective, right? It actually opened up something that we have been working on Cognate for last 8 months, right? So where the agents, as Sheng said, right, like not just from an action standpoint of view, you can actually make it collaborative, personal versus industrial and things like that. But when I think from a physical AI or a factory perspective, right? Four things I sort of feel that there are some hurdles, some challenges, right? First is the latency aspect, right? OpenClaw can be very fast in a digital world, right? But if you add like 100 millisecond, right, round trip to a cloud, right, then you will start seeing robots that are acting, jerky or laggy or even unsafe, right? Especially when people are around them, right? Second aspect is the safety element, right? When you are sharing these things in a human space, the hallucination of software is annoying. Like, I know Sanjay mentioned that aspect of it, right? On a factory, it can be annoying in a software, but it is actually very dangerous on a factory floor, right? You cannot go back, whether it's a collision or pinch injury, right? We don't want to afford any oops moments on a factory floor, right? But also the other two are reliability aspect, right? You want these agents to be running 99.99% uptime, right? In a noisy, in a dusty, in a real world conditions, right? Not in a clean room environment. And then we talked about the security aspect, right? Because when these agents start controlling the actuators on a robot or machines, right? You don't want somebody to hack them, right? So so these are the things I think there, right, from a challenges perspective, and we know how to solve them as well, right? But there's challenges.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madhu.
Yeah.
So maybe Floria, everybody else want to ask your thoughts about this question?
Actually, David, if I will, actually, I'm going to jump in. Florin, so you've actually seen Claude connect to a real robot in Austin last year during your meetup. I think it was Duck 15.
Yeah, we did have
from what you saw. Yeah, I would love for you to go talk a little bit more about that, which is, from what you witnessed, what did it actually take for an LLM to connect to a robot? And how does OpenClaw change that? Because that was before, and now we're post OpenClaw.
Yeah, so I mean, the amazing thing was that it turned like it was a chat, like the presenter did a chat session with a real robot in the warehouse. Honestly, I don't know how they made it where it would be safe. I don't know all the background work that was done there, but definitely that was like a very early glimpse, like what is possible. So I do see some resemblance to the OpenClaw in a way that you practically talk to the robot and executes an action. But again, it comes down to like OpenClaw. It has I think one of the most important attributes of OpenClaw is the fact that you don't just it's not like question and answer type of interaction. It's more like, oh, I'm actually going to do these things for you in advance. So that would be probably more useful for robotics that is more general than more, let's say, like in a very controlled environment that you have to have like very precise type of robotics. I would say more like, let's say, like you have like a humanoid robot, and then it somewhat proactively thinks about, oh, well, maybe I should do this for you. Like I see like there's a toy on the floor, I should go in and do something about it. That's more like that. I would see something like OpenClaw that can like at least the idea of OpenClaw. I don't think we're going to use OpenClaw in the end. It's going to be something totally different, something that's going to have a lot of safety built into it. But something more like open-ended type of applications. But yeah, to answer your question, I don't have the answer exactly how was done behind the scenes, but the fact that the presenter was able to talk to the robot from our room and have it execute, interpret the command and then execute it on the other side. That was really like a glimpse, kind of like what OpenCloud could eventually, something like OpenCloud could do down the line. So I don't know if that answered your question. But
It's interesting because, it totally does actually. I mean, it looks like from, some of the demos that we've seen, OpenClaw is already doing that, right? It's being hooked up to, actual cameras, a VOM, and it's able to confer judgments on the fly and through natural language, just talking to him.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, before it looks like OpenClaw might be democratizing more of those use cases, which could open up a lot more experimentation, which would be really interesting to see actually in your meetups in the coming months.
And that's the beauty of like experimentation in the open source. Like people do all these experiments at their homes. They have their own robot arms. They can do all kinds of experiments that usually they're not possible, I would say, in a more corporate environment. So you will see all kinds of experimentation that's going to come out of this. I'm quite excited to see what we're going to build.
David, this is just a kind of maybe a pie in the sky idea, but it would be really cool to maybe create like a startup weekend light hackathon that's sponsored by Siemens or HP, right? And then get Aston's, robotics community team up with Florin and seeing what we can build within 3 days, right? That will be an amazing way to actually link up large corporations with essentially the Grady startup ecosystem here.
Interesting suggestion. Actually, I organized Silicon Valley Startup Weekend, my gosh, like nearly 10 years ago in Silicon Valley.
Oh, yeah. I was part of that team, David. That's why I'm suggesting it. Let's bring it back.
Here's a challenge. All the hackathon
I was going to say really fast though, Sanjay, to your point about the, your LLM that kind of lied to you. Imagine what's happening, right, with this OpenClaw is that it has your credit card information, right? In some cases, and very, Florin was talking about, I'm installing it in my main computer. But then think about how many times you've actually linked something that's personal. And then what happens, right? What happens if your OpenClaw goes and clears out your bank account? Where's the liability? You know what I mean? And I think that some of those questions have to be asked before it's available to everyone without those guardrails, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's more like open. Go ahead.
Oh, I said that's why Claude is. I mean, I feel like any of the larger companies like Flock could have created OpenClaw, but they really just don't want to deal with the liability.
Right.
Liability is a huge hurdle. So leave it to the open source guys to figure that out. Use at
your own risk. Yeah, connect at your own risk.
Yeah,
we'll all be citing liability.
You're gonna say.
One of the things I think about, I mean, I know it's hyperbole, right? But you have to sometimes think of the dystopian scenarios. What's the worst thing that can happen, right? If you think about something like OpenClaw, the ability to grasp, right? I mean, like humans, we have judgment. When is it appropriate to use force in a situation? Say somebody enters into the factory or what have you, right? When is it appropriate to use, say, deadly force or not use deadly force, right? And I'm not saying that's happening tomorrow, but if we don't start thinking about those things now, there's huge repercussions down the road, right? And you now go from that hyperbole to something simple, right? Even just what's the gray area on a simple matter, to shut down the production line or to make some adjustments or what have you, right? Those are things we have to kind of find the simpler cases before we
Right.
get to something crazy like that, right?
How do we build the kill switches, right? Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I see this more like the same way like in self-driving, right? Like it's called the long tail problem. So there's a lot of startups that don't exist anymore in the self-driving world just because they were able to solve the first part, like like the not in the graph like a long tail problem. So they were able to solve the first part, the first 90% or 99%, but it's always harder to solve the next 9, right? So I would say like something similar is going to happen in this world with agents and OpenClaw, where yeah, you have like simple cases where it's really fun to try them out. So you eventually going to get to something that's somewhat controllable in like the first part of the graph, but then when you get from the second line to the third line, like it takes as much time to get to the second line of safety to the third line and so on. So it's almost the same problem that I see it the same. It's going to take lots of work. Right now it's fun, and then really like a lot of people jumped into it, but to get it actually to a place where it's safe is going to take way more work and probably a lot more years to get to that point.
What you said is very important. There's a principle in business or technology called dominant design, right? So if you build something, once you go down a path, right, and you go a certain length, and if you haven't factored in some of that long tail stuff, right, you can potentially at the end of the day have to scrap everything you've built and start all over again because you never factored that in. Because you can't, once you get down to a certain point, you cannot adjust and adapt to that, right? So you have to think about design thinking. I'll keep it short there.
I agree. This is great conversation, Sanjay, right? I just want to wrap, right? I think when we think from the OpenClaw perspective, right, the agent perspective, a couple of things I think were in touch, something to touch, right? When it comes to the scaling of it in physical robots, one is the human state awareness, right? It's like a real-time sensing of the human. So the agents just don't execute commands. It adapts to whether that operator is tired, unsafe, frustrated, confused, whatever, right? Second is the safety guardrails, right? It's like, we need to protect, right? Even if an agent hallucinates, right, or gives you the wrong information, the robot physically should not able to cross safety boundaries, right? These are the two aspects I think the scaling of this needs to go. But beside that, right, when we think about what it is already bringing, the excitement it's bringing, right? Whether it is VLMs on the edge for natural language tasking, right? An agent saying to a human or another machine, hand me the next part or next module, right? Or asking one robot to delegate a task to another because something wrong with the productivity, right? Things like that, right? I think for me, the holy grail of an agent is that not only just follows instructions, but actually understands the human cognitive state and becomes an empathetic teammate, right? That is what I would like to see, right? That is the holy grail for me when it comes to agents. Thanks. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for everybody's time, and time flies. So we're going to throw the last question, more like a casual question about our community. And we have 4 Austin, 1 San Antonio, 1 Dallas. Let's talk about how to build our physical AI community. Just Sean brought a good point about the hackathon. Hackathon, one of the challenges is hardware. In the phone, you can standardize the device, but in real robots, it's going to be expensive on the robot. So my question to all of you is that, do you have any suggestions that, I know a big company, NVIDIA and Siemens, they spent billions of dollars to do lots of different things. How can we, as a community, and organizers and even organizers help in the ecosystem and open ideas.
Yeah, I do have one idea. In
First,
fact, yeah, go ahead.
no, Foreign, you go ahead out.
Yeah, I do have an idea. So there's a lot of open source projects out there on robotics. One of them that I'm very fond of and I've been playing with is called Little Robot. And for maybe a couple $100, you can literally build like 3D print a robot, and for like literally like for a couple of $100, and then you get a couple of about like 6 motors. So you can like for a couple of $100 you can build something like on the spot. And the beauty of this project is that you first of all you get to build something like a physical some physical robot arm, but also on the other side you get to experience the latest AI models that are out there. So open source world is already like at the cutting edge when it comes to the robotic what's called the policies. So that's one of the things that I've been thinking, and that would be very like I've seen hackathons done this way where you have used this it's called a little robot. You can check it out, and it's feasible. Yeah, like you don't have to spend that much. Like for maybe a couple of like $1,000, you can get the motor. Once you have the motors, then you can have people 3D print. And I know some people. There's some places in Austin that have already the 3D printers. You can partner with them, so it can be done. It can be done. I know it can be done.
Absolutely, for sure. And I think Foreign touched on really important aspects from a feasibility and realistic standpoint. I'll approach this angle from someone who's organized hackathons and trying to get sponsors in, as well as trying to get the participants in, right? Because essentially what a hackathon is like a marketplace. You're matching the sponsors to the participants. So the for quality participants to come in, there's 3 basic requirements. Number 1, a sexy problem, right? It has to be a problem that actually gets engineers, designers, business people actually excited. So number 2, limited scope. You're not trying to, like solve all the company's problems at the end of the day. It's very similar to how startups operate within physical AI right now, is that you can't just create a self-driving car. Maybe you just create a database for U-turn, right? Hey, for example, that's limiting the scope. And limiting a scope, there's such thing as, MVP, min viable products, right? No, which is in, introducing essentially a new perspective or new frameworks to an existing corporation that might need those new things coming in. And then finally, the third one is good prizes, right? Good prizes. I think this one is very, very underestimated. So as long as you have a sexy problem, limited scope, and good prizes, then you're able to attract essentially good participants as well.
Can I offer an idea? And this is just something we use this at the student level, right? So I do a lot of mentoring with students. One of the things that I think would be so interesting is you talked about the sexy, idea, right? But if you have the people who have the idea and then you have the people who know how to use the tools, what if over a 3-month period or something, they created a team? So I know how to use the tools, but I may not have a sexy idea. And I've got a sexy idea, but I don't know how to use the tools. And if the two of them work together or they created a team over a period of a couple of months, and that is the event, right, where you bring the industry together alongside of these teams that they didn't even know each other before they kind of matched up. So you have the developers that are being teamed up with the people with the ideas, and then you invite industry to come in. That's kind of how we do it with our students in mentoring. So it might be something that, we can try out in Austin. Bring San Antonians up and vice versa, right? Trade talent.
One other thing to build on what you're saying too. I mean, all the cities in in Texas have some sort of infrastructure, traffic issues, or problems, right? But maybe if it's an Austin event, maybe being a little bit laser focused. Is there something around infrastructure or the basic needs of Austin that can be addressed through robotics versus a hackathon? If you combine with what you said about the 3 criteria, and it's something that's meaningful and impactful, that could be an angle too that could be tested out too, right?
I think that's all good. The only thing I would like to add is in order to make the idea pragmatic, and that Sheng suggested already, right? You need to have the specialists and industry domain experts validating this. They cannot come in after the fact. They need to be, so that's how you make it pragmatic for real world, right? So, and that experience comes from whether it's people from Siemens, Rockwell Automation, right, or a manufacturer from Samsung or or a Tesla here, which is close to Austin, right? So, some people who have gone through this be part of this ideation as well.
Yeah, you could add advisors in that are maybe domain experts
Correct.
that supports a team, right?
That's right. Advisor, guidance,
It's
right?
actual. It's that's such a good point, Madhu. That's literally alignment and incentives, because if you're sponsoring this hackathon, it's to your benefits essentially to actually embed yourself with the teams. I mean, you're paying for learning. That's what.
Yeah. So,
David, you're muted.
David, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. So I have a simple idea I believe is doable with very little cost, called connect Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas together, right? That's something simpler. So a little bit of advertisement. We are going to Dallas on March 5th, and San Diego will work together with us. And March 12th, during South by Southwest, we have over 200 people registered to our physical event already. This will be a 2 warm-up event. But in future, yes, I understand the hackathon. To put together the 3 criteria which Sheng mentioned, that's a very good point, and plus Madhu's suggestions. But honestly, it's lots of work. So in Silicon Valley, that's one thing I noticed. It's very easy to get a lot of sponsors and volunteers. In Austin, it's like 10 times more difficult than compared with Austin, particularly sponsorship part. We can give a try. I'm very willing to listen. If anybody have any suggestions, we are willing to help. But the bring Austin and Dallas region together is something we already started. We are doing it regardless. Let's give a try to see how we can actually doing something together. And also, welcome to join our future events and recommend sponsors, partners, speakers. We can do some lightning. So light like a demo talk first before we run a very formal hackathon. Yes, I'm definitely interested in. Okay, great. That's pretty long, and I want to thank you all for joining today's session. That's conclude our panel. Next session, we're gonna have the showcase session, and Madhu is gonna do a short 5 minutes presentation. All of you are very welcome to stay, but you can also so conclude. Thank you so much.
thank you all.
Great. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Great to meet you.
You too.
Wonderful. Now I'm going to spotlight Madhu, and so you're going to you are welcome to do a presentation if you have. You don't have presentation, you can just do a talk.
About my company, I can do. Yes.
Yes. You want to do a present? Go ahead, start right now.
Let me open it up. Give me a second.
You can go ahead and share. I'll give you the permission.
Share my screen. Share screen. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
So far, great. Go ahead and start once you're ready.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I think we sort of a little bit touched, right? So we at CogniEdge, right, we are sort of advancing physical AI through adaptive human-robot collaboration. What we are essentially doing is we are building an empathetic robotics, which is the cognitive layer for Industry 5.0. So if you look at the overall, our goal is very, very simple, right? Robots that sense human fatigue, stress, and cognitive overload and adapt to keep people safe. And that's the future of work we are essentially building. We have, the team is pretty much very much experienced. We all, combinedly have, more than 80 years of experience around working in these areas, right? Our related fields, especially manufacturing, some compute side of things, as well as the operations aspect of it. So what essentially we are doing is like, oh, sorry, let me see. So when this we talked about a little bit, the factory of the future, right, is not about isolated fenced off robots, right? That's how today in the factories are. You have these huge robots in fenced environments, and these robots are going to move into shared workspaces thanks to physical AI, right? Now these robots have intelligence, so they will be start moving into the factory floor. Once they move into the factory floor, we'll start seeing them collaborating with human beings, right? And this is the biggest opportunity, right, to build that smarter, safer, more productive collaboration, right? But there is a gap also as well that we need to think about. How will robots, which are very fast and which are blind to human cognitive state, because robots can work 24/7 fast, but they are pretty much blind to how humans feel, right? Humans get fatigued if they work 8 hours. In fact, if humans work for 14 plus hours, it's like almost having a significant percentage of alcohol in them, right? So how do they work with human beings? And that's what we are trying to address, right? The core problem we are essentially solving is cognitive blindness. And what you see here is pretty much 20 to 30% of productivity is lost today, across the world, right, because of human fatigue and human cognitive overload. And there are reports from McKinsey's to World Economic Forums, trillions of dollars that are lost. And when it comes to industrial sector, they talk about more than $500 billion being lost because of human aspects related to that, right? And we need to start thinking about how do we eliminate that, right? And when we start bringing those things together, there are aspects around safety, the efficiency and the burnout cost. So these are the problems that Cogniage is solving, right? So what is our solution? This is where our human state guardian comes in, right? It is the real neuroadaptive HRI system that gives robots the ability to understand and protect humans as they work alongside. We sense the cognitive state through a combination of brain signals, postures, physiological and environmental clues. We reason instantly using our hybrid intelligence, and then we adapt to the robot behavior in a moment, which means we can slow down the robot to keep the pace of the human being. We can reallocate the task, all right? Or just offer simple empathetic prompts like, hey, take a break, right? We got this, right? Um, the essence, the outcome is it is proactive safety and a smoother collaboration, right? We are seeing, that robots are going to become true teammates, not just automated machines, right? And then this fits in directly with a lot of industries, not just manufacturing as well, right? And this is completely focused on the edge compute layer or edge layer. That means we are going to be a lot more real time addressing the safety constraints within 30 milliseconds, right? Because that's the standard that they put out, for safety responses, right, in the industry. So, but anyway, overall, it's not just about the safety, right? It's also about operational excellence, powered by real understanding, real time understanding of how the human worker is also feeling when you're working with it. And this is going to be the challenges that we are addressing from a future of working perspective. And I will skip this. This is sort of our core framework, which comes with multiple innovations around it, right? It has the concept of hybrid reasoning, that actually not only saves the energy at the edge, right? Today, robots do a lot of, require a lot of energy consumption, but also the compute with a lot of GPUs require a lot of, energy consumption. So how do we also keep in sustainability aspect of it, right? And how do we provide the XAI, the explainable AI, because people want to trust what these robots are doing as well, right? How do you build that trust? And collaborative sensing, how you collect all the data, whether it's from robots, the environment, right, the physiological state of the human being. Um, how do you multimodal fusion of this data to make decisions? How do you use digital twins to optimize safety or efficiencies? right? How do you do all this at the edge, right? And obviously the swarm sync planning we talk about, I think we touched upon that in the previous discussion as well, right? How do you make all these robots work together in spite of some situations that happen on the factory floor, right? There might be a product change, there might be a robot that's down, right? How do you adjust and so that the production is not impacted, right? Today, the systems are down for more than a year, more than a week sometimes, right? We saw the shortage of chips last year. We saw the shortage of memory chips this year because these factories, even though they are automated, they are very rigid in nature. They cannot adapt. So this is the framework that actually enables that adaptability. Technical loop, I won't go in, right? Our company has pretty much leads in this space. We have like 15 patents associated with this aspect. And that's pretty much it. I know I wanted to pause here. I already took a little bit more time than required. Thanks, David. And I'm open for any questions and thoughts as well.
Great, thank you. I have a couple very simple questions. How long your company had been around in Austin region? How long you have been in Austin?
I've been in Austin close to 15, David. I think give or take 1 or 2 years. I lived in Austin and then I moved to Leander. I think right? So we moved. So I had stayed in Austin for 8 years and then moved to the suburbs. I think after that in 2015 I moved to Leander, right? The suburbs of Austin. But that's the company. So I was with Dell working on the edge compute solution for manufacturing. We started the company actually very, very new. It's actually last September. So September we started our pace has been so fast, and I'm partly thankful to AI, but also the interest that we are getting, right? The teammates, it was very fast in the sense because there was a lot of interest shown by the industry for us to pursue this. So we were like get go. The day we said we had, we went through the analyst discussions, right? Once the analyst said we get go, right? Got a green head, and then we spoke to manufacturing specialists, right, from NASA and others that we worked with before. So once we got the green signal, it was really, really fast paced. So currently we are finishing up a POC, proof of concept that only showcases the value of it, but we are a long way to go. We are working on the MVP.
Sounds good. Thank you. So actually, don't worry, I'm living in Leander as well. Maybe later on we can have some coffee or tea together. I'd love to learn more about the company. So thank you all, Madhu. I think that's all our sessions today. We're going to is live on YouTube, but we're going to do a recorded, edited videos a little bit later. Thank you, Madhu. Thank you all for all the audience.
Thank you all.
And check out our future events in Austin, March 12th, and Dallas, March 5th. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining.
Bye-bye.